The Dark Angels are regarded as the epitome of the dedicated Space Marine warrior. Serious-minded, slow to anger, but tenacious and all but unstoppable in their zeal once aroused. Hi, I'm Ed and welcome to Minisodes. I've decided that 2026 is to be the year of the Dark Angel. Other than my Deathwing for my Space Hulk set, I've never actually painted any, but I've always been intrigued by this brooding and grimdarkest of chapters. The combination of this painting by Dave Gallagher of Dark Angels surging down a Gothic staircase and Kendall's Dark Angel collection in White Dwarf 213 was enough to set me on the path of the First Legion. So I began the year by restoring this dusty old brute of a Land Raider from 1988 as the first entry for my Dark Angels army. I gave the chapter relic a good scrub in soapy water, then patted it down with kitchen towel in readiness for stripping. But when I found my trusty tub of BioStrip and peeled off the lid, I found very little of the substance actually left, and it was pretty overused. So I consoled myself by stripping the land speeder I'd accidentally left in there, whilst I figured out what to do instead. The Dark Angels would need a core of 500 points, so I brought my 2nd edition box down from the loft and began putting together a patrol. This would include a pristine on-the-sprue Rhino. But I've never painted a green Dark Angel before, so a test mini would probably be a sensible idea. I brought out my Space Marine Strike Force box, where I keep most of my Marine collection, threw down some bits, drilled some holes, and assembled myself a cool-looking Dark Angel Sergeant. Although rudimentary in comparison to modern sculpts and plastics, I always take a great deal of pleasure in posing these classic models. And seeing the chunky profile of a Space Marine come together as the pauldrons are set down, ooh, chef's kiss. After attaching the gun and the backpack, he was ready for a prime of Chaos Black. I quickly covered off any crevices, nooks and crannies the primer couldn't reach with Vallejo Model Black. Speaking of Vallejo, I was excited to try out this set of game color greens. The internet tells me that dark green is as close to the classic Citadel Dark Angels green as you can get. I splurged some on my palette and began layering this lovely, rich color onto the miniature. Adding a second thin coat for good measure. I used Xandri dust for the chest plate and the left knee pad where the company markings go. Now, I have a weakness for hazard stripes, so I set down a coat of Avalanche Sunset on his power fist. The lenses and bolt gun housing were painted Mephiston red. I should probably have mentioned this earlier, but I'm aiming for a paint scheme that I can quickly roll out without too much fuss across the whole army. The chest plate and knee was washed with Seraphim Sepia, then highlighted up with a mix of Xandri and Screaming Skull. I lightened the upper areas of the green armor with Angel Green. It's a pretty subtle shade, but I'm happy with the result here. The armor is a little on the flat side though, so to counter this I applied a pin wash of Nuln oil to the recessed areas of the armor, like the trim and the joints, to give the miniature a bit more depth. I did the same to the eye lenses, and painted his leather holster and pouches Rhinox hide. The red areas were highlighted with Mephiston red, then given a small application of Wild Rider red. Followed by the obligatory white dot in the corner of the eye lens and chest gemstone. I then returned the pouches and highlighted these sparingly with a mix of Rhinox hide and Gorthor brown. The metal areas were painted with Vallejo's gun metal, including the gun Aquila and cabling. no wash necessary. After a few details, like the stripes on the fist and fourth company checks, the Marine was ready for the final touches. GW's modern decal sheets are so good, and after prepping each area with microset, I applied the transfers, giving each one a few coats of microsol at intervals until they were properly flat. I bought this tub of Gatehouse Scenic's Red Earth at the UK Games Expo, specifically for this project. I spread a bit of PVA about carefully on the base, and dipped. Simple. I think the colour is a nice contrast to the deep green. To lock the stuff in, I added a drop of PVA and isopropyl solution. When that was all dry, I painted the rim black, and the test mini was done. Yeah, I'm happy with that. No edge highlights or too many steps, just a simple, effective scheme. Alright, time to build and paint myself 500 points of Dark Angels. Just like decorating a hallway, kitchen or bathroom, the more time you spend preparing the surface you're going to be slapping paint on, the better the finished result. And miniatures are certainly no exception here. Yeah, there's been a lot of that going on here, so a big shout out to John, the painter, if you're watching this. I made a very minor adjustment to this sergeant, swapping out his pistol for a bolt gun. The idea was to paint 2 combat squads, one tactical and one devastator. With the little men all cleaned up and assembled, I got started on the Rhino, clipping off the components. I wonder how many of these I've built or owned over the years. There's nothing worse than a wonky tank, so I used rubber bands to make sure the components kept their shape whilst the glue set. After an hour or so, I glued the hull together and let that dry on a flat surface. Now to add all the doodads, exhausts, hatches, and handrails to the Rhino. That took a bit longer than I anticipated, but the force was finally ready to be taken outside and primed en masse. Despite being -1 degrees Celsius and a bit gusty in the UK, the priming passed without incident. I overbrushed all the minis again with black paint, then started on the eye lenses, gemstones, and bolter housings with Mephiston Red. Then I got to dark greening all of the Marines. Now, with most Space Marine chapters, you have to allow for the pauldron trim, but not with the Dark Angels, so that sped things up a bit. But speaking of speed, despite being a simple scheme, batch painting any number of models is a bit of a grind, so I took plenty of breaks and listened to music and podcasts in an attempt to goad myself into some form of flow state. There's also quite an uncomfortable period of time where all your models just look a bit crap, and it is a relief to come out of the other side of it. Any variety was a welcome relief, like painting this sergeant's face Cadian flesh tone, washing it with Reichland flesh shade, then highlighting it again with a mix of pallid witch flesh and Cadian flesh tone. I started on the transfers. Then took a break to go on a nice long walk with Lauren in the forests of Caliban, also known as Ashton Court. The squad numbers go over the squad designation symbols, so here we have the 6th Tactical Squad alongside the 1st Devastator Squad of the 4th Company. In the gatehouse scenics they go, and on goes the ISO PVA solution. There we go, 10 Dark Angel Space Marines in about 10 hours of workbench time. Let's move on to the Rhino APC. I don't know what it is exactly, but there's something really satisfying about painting vehicles with a brush. With the Rhino suitably green, I tried out this Vallejo metallic, oily steel, and applied it to this model's infamous handrails. For the metal elsewhere, I used Vallejo's more subdued gunmetal. Just like on the Marines, the trim around the radiators was painted corn red. To lift these flat colours, I highlighted the sharp edges and rivets with Angel's Green, then Sick Green. I lined all the panels with Nuln Oil to give the recessed components some definition and shadow. And also washed the metallic areas. I didn't film this next part, but I used a pencil to sketch out the tactical arrows on the top hatch, then painted them carefully with corn red. With the Nuln Oil now dry, I highlighted the metallic areas once again. Then added transfers. I find that a coat of matte varnish does wonders for eliminating streaks and any glossiness left on the model, but took care to avoid the metallic areas. Not quite satisfied, I brightened up the red using Wild Rider, then mocked up some flags using Canva. Then carefully attached them to the poles. For a final touch, I weathered them with a thin coat of Agrak's Earthshade. $500 points in just over 2 days of pretty intense hobbying. They aren't going to win any painting competitions, but I'm happy with the colours and the simplicity of the process. I can now spend a bit more time focusing on single characters and centerpiece models like the Land Raider. A massive thank you to my wonderful Patreon community who make all of this possible. Without their support, there really wouldn't be any minisodes at all. Speaking of Patreon, I'll have a podcast episode all about the Dark Angels, both their background and this project, out later this month. Take it steady, everyone, and as ever, thanks for watching and happy hobbying.